Yan remained quietly seated in the cram school classroom, surrounded by the soft murmur of pages turning and low conversations. He sat still, his hands resting on the desk, his expression unreadable. Though the lesson had ended, he didn't rush to leave. Instead, he organized his notes, meticulous and dense, filled with highlights and tiny handwritten footnotes. Meanwhile, elsewhere Sihunbei Seethed. The humiliation from the failed ambush lingered in his chest like a poison. His underlings had failed him. Worse, they had embarrassed him in front of others. And now, whispers about his incompetence were already beginning to spread. He couldn't allow it. Before his superiors at the Young Dongpo Alliance stepped in to fix things their way, he had to take control of the situation himself. Personally, he needed to finish this at cram school. As Yan stood from his seat and prepared to leave, a few local thugs, not from his school, but clearly seasoned troublemakers, took notice of him. One of them noticed the school emblem on his uniform, Yunjiang High School. The boy looked delicate, almost fragile. So this is the kind of kid Yunjiang produces now. One of them muttered, their eyes, then landed on his notebook, neatly stacked, filled to the brim with carefully written summaries and detailed answers. Without asking, one of them grabbed it from Yin's desk. Yin didn't protest. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, watching, and when they suggested copying his notes, he just nodded, quietly, before turning away to leave. Outside the classroom, a shadow of Yan's past resurfaced. A classmate from his middle school years spotted him. Someone who remembered the quiet, brilliant student who was often awarded for excellence. The very same Siyun Yan who had once stood on school stages, shaking hands with principals, smiling under the spotlight of recognition. Now, that same boy walked away silently through the night, without even being greeted. On the bus ride home, Yan sat by the window. The neon lights of the city flickered against the glass. Behind him, the girl from cram school, the one who had admired his beauty, quietly sat a few rows back. She didn't speak, just observed him. He never noticed. The following day, the air shifted. At cram school again. Whispers filled the classroom. Homan Choi, the infamous bully who had vanished for days after his crushing defeat, had returned. But he wasn't the same. His steps were timid. His eyes darted toward the door as Yan entered the room. His body stiffened. His hands trembled slightly. The predator had become prey. He didn't speak. He didn't even look Yan's way. Others noticed. Some of them, those same thugs from before, approached Human. They whispered ideas, provoked him, promised him. If he helped bring Yan down, they said, the Young Dongpo Alliance might take notice. He could rise. He could reclaim his pride. Temptation wrapped itself around Human like a vice, and though his fear screamed at him to stay away, his desire for status, for redemption, for revenge, drowned out all logic. He agreed to help. The trap was set later. That day, back in class, Yan sat quietly as the same group of troublemakers who had been whispering earlier approached his desk. Their presence was aggressive, deliberate, without warning. One of them spat, not at Yan directly, but onto the pages of his open textbook. Yan's gaze didn't rise immediately. He looked down at the ruined pages, calm, calculating. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Human standing behind them, trembling. Clearly not a leader this time, just a follower, hiding behind muscle and noise. That was enough. Without warning, Yan rose and slammed the book he held straight into the first thug's face. There was a loud thwack as the hardcover connected with bone. The classroom froze. The second thug stepped forward, yelling that Yan was cheating, using a book as a weapon. But before the sentence was even finished, Yan's knee smashed into his stomach, folding him in half and sending him to the floor in a choking spasm. Yan returned to the first one. He didn't stop at one hit. He struck him again, and again, and again. The book cracked against the thug's face repeatedly, until blood began to splatter across the pages. His expression never changed. His eyes were distant, locked somewhere between fury and memory. Since middle school, Yan thought. Silently I swore I would never lose again. And in the depths of his mind, a memory surfaced, vivid and painful. A younger Yan, his body wrapped in bandages, sitting in the sterile cold of a hospital hallway. He waited there, bruised and broken, waiting for someone who never came. Remembered the weight of that loneliness, that the silence of that betrayal, and the cold promise he made to himself in that moment, never again. After the blows were dealt, the classroom fell into absolute silence. The once mocking voices, the arrogance, the threats, all of it vanished, like dust scattered by the wind. Yan returned to his seat. He didn't say a word. He didn't look back at the bloodied, groaning bodies on the floor. He simply picked up his book, now smeared with splashes of red, and quietly wiped the blood from its cover. His motions were precise, cold, as if this wasn't the first time. The tension was suffocating. No one dared speak. No one dared move. A haunting silence fell over the room, broken only by the faint, pained breaths of the boys he had just taken down. And just like that, Jan had changed. In a single class period, he had become something no one could explain or ignore. The rumors spread like wildfire. They flowed through the halls of the cram school, then out into the streets, into the ears of students at nearby schools, and finally reached those who were never meant to hear it. The circles of gang-bound delinquents, the alliances, and the reputations that held weight far beyond a simple schoolyard fight. Hyo-min Choi became the centerpiece of mockery once again, not just for his own failure, but for standing like a terrified statue while Yeon destroyed the others. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He had stood behind them, hiding. And once again, the legend of Yeon grew, along with Hyo-min's shame. Elsewhere, in a different classroom, Hyo-min Park was having a conversation about that very incident. It wasn't news to him. He had heard the rumors. But hearing the story firsthand from one of the witnesses about Yeon striking his enemy in the face with a textbook until blood soaked the pages made even Hyo-min pause, Pilyang, who had been eavesdropping on Hyo-min's conversation from nearby, began to grow anxious. The plan was supposed to be simple: get Si-hoon involved, let him take down Hyo-min, reclaim dominance, and solidify control. But that hadn't happened. Si-hoon never came. The ambush failed. The targets, Hyo-min and Yeon, were stronger than expected, and now the situation was spiraling. At a rundown abandoned house serving as a temporary base, Si-hoon raged. He yelled at his subordinates, calling them useless, blaming them for everything, for losing, for embarrassing him, for ruining his image. But even among his underlings, resentment simmered. They were growing tired of Si-hoon's arrogance, of how he acted invincible while sending them to do the dirty work. The facade was beginning to crack then. Si-hoon turned his rage toward one of them in particular, Hyba, who had been defeated by Yeon. Hyba, who had once been known as a monster in his own school. Now Si-hoon demanded Hyba go back to find Yeon and finish him in a proper one-on-one fight. There was no discussion, no plan, just an order. Hyba didn't respond, not with words at least. His eyes spoke of frustration, of quiet anger. But in the end, he obeyed. He had no choice. No one challenged Si-hoon out loud, even though in his heart, Hyba didn't know how to win this fight. In Yeonjang High School, the rumors became clearer, more structured. The whispers were no longer about a strange, quiet kid. They were about a new leader. In silence, and through violence, Si-hoon had become the unofficial top dog of his class. Some questioned it. Some couldn't believe that a small-framed student with delicate features could do the things they had heard about. But those who saw it firsthand, those who heard the cracking of bones, who saw Yeon's eyes while he fought, knew he wasn't normal. He wasn't just smart. He was terrifying. A student who would use anything: a book, a pen, a rock, whatever he needed to win. Someone who had vowed never to lose again. And that was something you couldn't teach. You couldn't intimidate it. You couldn't outmuscle it. Meanwhile, at Hyba's own school, a place where he wasn't just a student, but a symbol of fear, the story of his loss had begun to spread as well. The demon Hyba, beaten by a skinny kid, didn't make sense, but the curiosity had been sparked. One of the students, intrigued by the rumors, suggested something. He had heard of a cram school, one where a student from Yeonjang attended. Why not check it out? He said. We might find the guy there, or at least someone who knows him. Hyba at first resisted. He didn't like the idea of chasing someone, especially after being told where to look. But the logic was sound. If he went to that place, maybe he wouldn't even need to find Yeon himself. Maybe someone else, someone who attended the same high school, would know him. And what Hyba didn't yet realize was that the person they were talking about, the one he would soon meet again, was Yeon himself. The afternoon light cast a golden hue across the city as Hyba, the feared delinquent from another school, stood with arms crossed in front of the cram school. His patience had long run out. After the defeat of his peers by a single boy, described as frail, feminine, and soft-spoken, Hyba felt that he had no choice. His pride, bruised by association, demanded resolution. He needed to confront this Yeon, whose name was now a murmur in every alley, locker room, and hallway. But more than that, Hyba needed to reclaim something: his reputation. Earlier, he and his associate had convened. The topic was simple: where does this kid study after hours? The cram school seemed to be the common link among everyone who had seen or heard of Yeon. They didn't know what he looked like, but the rumors gave them enough. Skinny, quiet, smart, strange. That was enough for a hunter like Haiba to track prey. Before heading there, they made a detour, perhaps to shake off the tension, or perhaps to inflate their already overblown sense of superiority. At a nearby mall arcade, they gravitated toward a punching machine, an arena of bravado masquerading as a game. Huntak Go stepped up first, his knuckles tense, shoulders squared. With a deep breath, he threw a strong right cross into the machine. The numbers blinked rapidly before stopping at 870. Respectable human followed, eyes glinting with cocky amusement. His punch was heavier, more explosive, earning a 970 smirks. Followed, they laughed, teased, their voices brimming with juvenile pride. Then Gale Jin approached. Human was already celebrating. He didn't believe for a second that Gale could top him, but Gale did not raise his fists. Instead, with a calculated grin, he stepped back and delivered a clean, ruthless kick to the machine. There was a moment of stunned silence before the machine registered the number 999. The maximum laughter erupted, but not in joy. There was frustration, mockery, and disbelief. Gale shrugged with a smirk, having broken their egos with a single, rule-breaking kick. His laughter echoed in the arcade. Far away, in the cramped corridors of the cram school, Jan was quietly looking for something. His notebook, it had detailed notes, everything arranged perfectly with precision only a top student could maintain. He remembered that he had lent it out, and that person had no idea of the drama currently unfolding around Jan's name. To them, Jan was just a diligent student with good handwriting. Nothing more. Outside, Haiba's fury boiled. With every minute wasted, he grew more restless. He began interrogating random students near the entrance. He pulled aside 3 boys, none of whom he recognized. His eyes bore into them like drills, as he asked the same question again and again. Do you know someone named Hyun? But they only offered vague rumors, just the same scattered information everyone had. He wanted certainty, a face, a time, a place. Frustration mounted, and when an innocent boy passed too close to him, Haiba snapped. His fists flew, slamming into the boy's face and ribs. The student crumpled and tried to crawl away, but Haiba followed, striking again and again, the violence drawing a crowd but silencing them into fearful stillness. His fists echoed off the narrow walls of the alley near the cram school entrance. Dust and blood mixed in the summer air. And then it happened. A calm but firm voice called out from behind, cutting through the noise with surgical precision. Hey Haiba. The words were simple, but to Haiba, they carried the weight of everything he feared. Time seemed to slow as the sounds around him dulled. He froze. His fists remained clenched midair, his breath stuck in his throat. He knew that voice. He didn't want to turn, not because he was scared of who it might be, but because he already knew who it was. And that knowledge alone was enough to steal the power from his legs. He turned slowly, as if in a trance. The air thickened with tension, his shoulders tightened, his neck stiff, his mind racing. His eyes scanned the figure standing a few steps away. It was him. The boy from the rumors. The boy who had tied up Human Choi in front of the entire class. The boy who had smashed skulls with textbooks, who had dismantled opponents with surgical violence. The one everyone called weak until he wasn't Hyun. Haiba's heartbeat echoed like a war drum in his chest. But this wasn't just a meeting. This was the prelude to something inevitable. Haiba's breath caught in his throat the moment he heard that voice. Hey, Haiba. It was soft. No anger, no growl, no warning. But to Haiba, it may as well have been thunder. His chest clenched, muscles locking up like steel cables. Time seemed too slow, the murmurs of the crowded hallway outside the cram school blurring into static. Sweat began to gather along his temples. His body refused to turn, but his instincts screamed louder than his fear. Slowly, Haiba pivoted his head, inch by inch, like a man facing a firing squad, and there he was. Slim. Quiet. That familiar school uniform hung loosely on his frame, a pen in hand, just a pen. But to Haiba, it was a blade sharper than anything he'd ever faced. This wasn't the first time he'd seen violence. Haiba had made others tremble. He had once snapped a kid's arm in a single motion just to prove a point. In his school, he was called the Demon, a walking nightmare with bloodied knuckles and a record of unchallenged dominance. But this was different. This wasn't fear of losing. This was fear of knowing he already lost. Jan didn't flinch, didn't raise his hand, didn't say anything else. He simply walked toward Haibanden, past him, no warning, no fight. Just silence. And somehow, that silence crushed Haiba more than a punch ever could. It was like being buried alive beneath his own dread. He didn't feel ignored. He didn't feel slighted. He felt grateful. Grateful Jan didn't kill him where he stood. Back at school, the following morning, the classroom had changed. not visibly but in the air, in the weight, in the unspoken tension. Where there had once been bullying and chaos, there was now stillness. Yan's deskmate noticed it most of all. He wasn't brave, nor was he particularly smart, just an average student trying to get through high school quietly. But even he could see what he had done, the way the loudest kids now walked quieter, the way no one spit on desks anymore, the way Human, once a wild, unpredictable thug, now sat quietly, like a frightened child, keeping his eyes low every time Hyun walked past. And then there was Yan himself. That day, he had fallen asleep on his desk, arm over his eyes, the weight of something much heavier than school resting on his chest. His deskmate hesitated, then stood and quietly pulled the curtain closed to block the harsh sunlight. Just a small gesture, a small comfort. He didn't know why he did it. It just felt right. Inside the haze of half dreams, Yan twitched. It was a gesture that clawed at something buried deep in his mind, something tender, something warm, a memory, a faint flicker of a person he had once looked up to, someone who had once protected him, stood by him, fought for him, someone who once had done the same thing, shielding him from the light when he was too tired to even open his eyes. That moment of care, that person, gone, Yeon, opened his eyes slowly. The curtain swayed gently, casting shadows on the desk, and, for some reason, it made him uncomfortable. Maybe kindness always felt like a foreign language to him. He sat up, walked to the window, and opened the curtain again, like trying to erase the moment. Their eyes met his deskmate, awkward and unsure. Yan nodded slightly. Not a thank you, not acknowledgement, just coexistence. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the school, another storm was brewing. Pilyang was losing his patience. Every plan, every effort, every chain of control he had set in motion undone by that skinny kid from Yeonjong High. Human, beaten and silenced, Haiba, reduced to a trembling mess in front of the whole cram school. The street rumors were growing. That skinny kid, he destroyed home and scared Haiba without lifting a finger. Maybe he's stronger than Human Pak. Pilyang sat under the school stairwell, surrounded by cigarette butts and discarded energy drink cans. His fingers trembled not from fear, but from frustration. His head throbbed with noise. He had counted on Sehun taking out Human Park, but Sehun had gone quiet. Rumor said even he was shaken. Now Pilyang's perfect pyramid of power was collapsing. He needed a new target, someone whose defeat would restore the fear his name once carried, someone who was messing everything up. Forget Human, he muttered, flicking the cigarette into the ground. I'll crush Yan myself. It happened in an instant. Yan, taking out the classroom trash during after-school cleanup duty, stood alone near the incinerator bin by the courtyard wall. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, and everything felt unusually quiet. Then, a sudden cold drenched his scalp. The carbonated fizz of cola stung his eyes as the sugary liquid ran down his forehead, dripping onto his uniform collar and soaking his shirt. He didn't flinch. He didn't say a word, but his body froze, eyes narrowing as his gaze tilted upward. Toward the second-floor balcony of the school building, silhouetted against the orange sky, were two figures quickly ducking out of view. Yan didn't recognize their faces, but he memorized their classroom, instantly, unconsciously, with the clarity of someone who's been targeted. Before he stood motionless for a few seconds longer, then calmly placed the trash in the bin, turned, walked away, no shouting, no chase, just a mental bookmark. There was a reason the name Pilyang Kim carried weight, but it wasn't because he was strong. In fact, Pilyang had never been in a real fight, not one that mattered. He didn't train, didn't bleed, didn't even like getting dirty, but his weapon wasn't fists, it was money. His father was a powerful CEO, or real estate, clubs, high-rises, untouchable wealth, and that wealth trickled down like blood through a dynasty of corruption, straight into Pilyang's designer shoes and platinum phone. He never had to throw a punch. Why would he when you could buy fists? That's how it started. His crew didn't gather around him because they feared him, they circled him because they owed him. Expensive sneakers, free lunches, club access, private tutors, concert tickets, allowances. He built loyalty with cash. He bought status. He rented influence. And that illusion made him dangerous. Not because he was strong, but because he could make others believe they weren't safe without him. Later that night, rooftop meetup. Under flickering rooftop lights of a building behind a PC bang, the meeting took place. Pilyang had summoned two of his newer assets, Teo Jin and Suchan Jang. They arrived late still, laughing about a prank they pulled earlier in the day. Why'd you call us here? Teo asked, cracking open a soda. Got something serious? Pilyang didn't smile. He sat against a rusty railing, staring at the cityscape. We're taking over Yunjiang, he said coldly. Datsushan blinked. You mean everything? The hierarchy? The fear? The flow of influence? He paused, glancing at the drink in Teo's hand. It starts with knocking out the names people whisper about. You mean when Pilyong's expression didn't change? That scrawny freaks become a symbol, one that needs to disappear. There was silence. Then a smirk spread on Teo's lips. I got just the idea. Yan entered the classroom. With damp hair and a clean uniform, no one said anything, but eyes followed him, some nervous, some curious, some amused because the story had already spread. Someone dumped soda on Yen's head. It had made its way through group chats and whispers. There were even bets going around. Would he retaliate? Would he break bones again? Yan didn't speak. He simply took his seat and began drying his textbook with a tissue. But his mind wasn't calm. He remembered the balcony. He remembered the shape of Teo's silhouette, and he was already calculating, not if but when.